In this tutorial, we're going to continue with player movement. So currently, our player moves at a constant rate when we hit left and right and changes the animation. However, it would actually look a lot nicer if when we started moving, our player sped up a little bit, and when we took our fingers off the keys, it slowed down a little bit. It would just look a little bit more natural. So how are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to do is, instead of setting the velocity to a fixed speed, we're going to increase the velocity the longer we hold down the key. So it'd make it go faster. So instead of -1, we're going to go player.velocity.x -1. So we're going to take out whatever the current value is when we move left, and we're going to decrease it by 1. And the same when we hit right, player.velocity.x +1. So when we hit right, the longer we hit right, the faster we're going to move to the right. So what does that look like? Well, at the moment, if I hold down right now, I speed up. Just like Dash in The Incredibles. So it actually goes way too fast after a while. So it looks nice in the beginning, but then becomes a little bit crazy. Unless that's how you want your game to be. So we need a way of limiting that speed. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having this else clause here, I'm just going to remove it, and I will hit this by default. Okay. Or I will have a different condition that will change my animation. So we're going to set a limit on our velocity. So if our player.velocity.x is less than -5, so that means we're moving to the left because we're negative, and if we're less than -5, that would be moving quite fast to the left. What am I going to do? Then I'm going to set my player.velocity.x to equal -5. So I've put a speed limit going left. And now I'll do the same thing to the right. If player.velocity.x is greater than 5, then player.velocity.x equals 5. I've put a speed limit in, effectively. Okay. Now at the moment, I could test this, but these lines here are going to get in the way. So I'll just comment out this velocity 0 so we can test this. And so now I speed up. So you can see I kind of do a slow down, speed up thing. But I don't stop anymore. So we're going to have to do something about that. So after I've put in my speed limits, I'm going to run a test. If my velocity.x is greater than -1 and player.velocity.x is less than 1. So what does that mean? It means that if my speed is between -1 and 1, then my speed is between -1 and 1, then I will set it to 0. So let's see what happens here. Refresh. So I hit 5, but I never actually slow down to. So I kind of hit it. So you can see that I kind of, if I play with it enough, I can change my speed a little bit. There we go, I kind of hit it. But what I'd like that to naturally slow down when I release the keys. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to generally slow my velocity. So every frame, it's going to do player.velocity.x equals 0.9 times player.velocity.x. So what's this going to do in effect? Okay, to explain it in normal terms. When I hold down the right arrow, it's going to increase the speed by 1, right up to a value of 5. When it hits 5, it's not going to let it go any faster. If I am not pressing the key, that speed is going to decrease naturally. So if it's 5, it's going to multiply by 0.9, so 0.9 times 5 is 4.5, and it's going to decrease to 90% of that again, so down to, say, 3.7, and then down to 2 point something, and then down to 1 point something. Eventually it's going to get less than 1, and then it's going to set it to 0. So it's going to naturally slow my player down when they finish moving. So let's see what that actually looks like. So now I speed up, and then I kind of slow down. How can I show that more dramatically? Well, I used 0.9 here, but what if I use 0.99? And refresh. So I've released, and you can see my player slowing down. So I'm not holding release, and my player kind of slows down over time. So that's how something could come to, say, a rolling stop. So for my example, I think 0.9 feels about right. It pretty much stops exactly where I wanted it to, and it just might take one extra step. So that's my player moving left and right. So you don't have to have your player moving left and right in such a complicated fashion. You could just stick with the original version of just absolute values. That's totally fine for you if that's what you choose. But this is how I wanted mine to be. Now there are a couple of things I wanted to change here. Just one more thing before we move on. My player can move off the screen, and my camera does not follow the player. So first of all, let's prevent our player moving off the screen. So how are we going to do that? Well, in our draw function, after we've checked the input, we're going to check world bounds on the player against the tiled map. Okay. So all that line will do is it will prevent our player leaving the screen. It can't leave the world. It sees the edge and can't go any further. However, on the right-hand side, it can keep going, and the reason it can keep going is because this edge here is not the end of the world. The world extends out here to the right, but our camera is not following our player. So we should fix that. So where are we going to fix that? We're going to do that in our draw function. And for now, we will just do that after we have drawn all our layers. So we're going to focus the camera on the player within the tiled map. Okay, so we'll refresh this, and now we can see that when we're kind of in the middle, the camera chooses to follow the player left and right. So if I had a larger world that was quite wide, the camera would follow it. Now this also works up and down vertically, and we'll see that later on. In our next tutorial, we're going to add a few features to our game. We're going to start adding things like gravity and the ability to jump.